I arrived at base camp on a Tuesday in late September. The weather window was supposed to hold for 5 days, maybe 6. That was the plan anyway. There were 4 of us: me, Sarah, who I'd climbed with twice before, Marcus, her partner, who had more high-altitude experience than both of us combined, and Derek, who Sarah knew from a climbing gym in Portland. This was Derek's first expedition over 20,000 feet. We were attempting the northeast ridge of Pic Pobeda, a mountain in the Tian Shan range that sits on the border between Kyrgyzstan and China. 24,000 feet. Not Everest, not even close, but technical enough and remote enough that most years only a handful of teams try it. The approach had taken 3 days. First a flight to Bishkek, then a long drive on deteriorating roads, then horses and porters to get our gear to base camp at 14,000 feet. By the time we arrived, I was already tired from travel, and the altitude was making itself known. Mild headache, slight nausea, the feeling that I couldn't quite catch my breath. We spent 2 days at base camp acclimatizing, drinking water, eating, sleeping poorly in the thin air. The weather stayed clear, cold at night, dropping below 0, but the days were sunny and calm. On Friday, we moved up to Camp 1 at 17,000 feet. The climb took 6 hours, following a moraine and then a steep snowfield. My pack weighed 40 pounds. Every step required thought and effort. By the time we reached the camp, my legs were shaking and my lungs burned. We pitched our tents on a small platform we carved into the slope. Derek vomited twice that evening. Altitude sickness, but not severe. Marcus gave him medication and told him to drink more water. "How you feeling?" Sarah asked me while we were melting snow for dinner. "Tired." "Headache." "Same. It'll get better once we adjust." I nodded. We'd both been through this before. The first few days at altitude were always rough. That night, the wind picked up. Not dangerous, but loud. The tent walls shook and snapped. I lay in my sleeping bag listening to it, drifting in and out of shallow sleep. Saturday, we were supposed to move to Camp 2 at 19,000 feet. We woke to clouds moving in from the west. Marcus checked the weather forecast on his satellite device. "Low pressure system coming through," he said. "Might bring snow. We should wait it out here." So we stayed at Camp 1. The clouds thickened through the morning. By afternoon it was snowing lightly. Not a storm, just steady light snow that accumulated slowly. We spent the day in our tents reading or trying to sleep. I had brought a paperback thriller that I couldn't focus on. I kept reading the same page over and over. Eventually I gave up and just lay there watching the tent ceiling. The snow continued into the evening. Marcus checked the forecast again. "Should clear tomorrow," he said. "We'll move up then." But Sunday the snow didn't clear. It got heavier. By midday, visibility was down to maybe 50 feet. The wind was stronger too, gusting hard enough that we had to reinforce the tent anchors. We stayed in our tents. There was nothing else to do. Monday morning the snow stopped, but the clouds remained. The forecast showed clearing weather arriving Tuesday, holding through Wednesday, then more systems moving in Thursday. "We need to move," Marcus said. "If we wait another day, we'll miss the window entirely." We packed up and started climbing toward Camp 2 in flat grey light. The new snow made the route harder to follow. Everything looked the same: white slope, white sky, no contrast. We roped together and moved slowly, testing each step. The climb took 8 hours instead of the planned 5. My headache had gotten worse. Derek was moving slow, stopping every few minutes to rest. Sarah developed a cough that wouldn't stop. Camp 2 was just a narrow ledge we'd identified on the route map. We got there late afternoon and immediately started setting up tents. My fingers were numb. Simple tasks took twice as long as they should have. That night I couldn't eat. My stomach rejected everything. I managed a few sips of tea, and that was it. "You need calories," Sarah said. "Try again in an hour." I tried again in an hour and threw up. Tuesday the weather cleared like the forecast promised. Blue sky, no wind, perfect conditions. I felt worse. The headache had spread. Now my whole skull ached. I was dizzy when I sat up. My appetite was completely gone. "High-altitude cerebral edema," Marcus said after examining me. "Early stages. You need to descend." "I'll be fine," I said. "I just need to adjust." "You're not adjusting. You're getting worse." He was firm. "You go down today or you'll be in real trouble tomorrow." We argued about it, but not for long. I knew he was right. I'd seen Hayes before, on a climb in the Andes 2 years ago, another climber who'd insisted he was fine until he wasn't. We'd had to assist him down in the middle of the night, barely coherent, stumbling like he was drunk. So it was decided. I would descend to Camp 1, spend the night there, then continue to base camp the next day. The others would push for the summit. "I'm sorry," I said. "Don't be," Sarah said. "Health first, always." They helped me pack my gear, gave me extra food I probably wouldn't eat, made me promise to radio when I reached Camp 1. I started down around 10 in the morning. The descent was supposed to take 3 or 4 hours. Going down was easier than going up, but I had to be careful. Most climbing accidents happen on the descent. Fatigue and reduced attention. The route down was straightforward at first. I followed our tracks from the day before, still visible in the snow. The sky stayed clear. The temperature was maybe 10 degrees Fahrenheit. Cold, but manageable. About an hour into the descent, I slipped. Not a fall, just my foot sliding on hard ice under the snow. I caught myself with my ice axe, but it rattled me. After that I moved even slower, checking each placement carefully. My headache wasn't improving. If anything, it felt worse. The dizziness came in waves. I had to stop several times and wait for it to pass. I reached Camp 1 around 2 in the afternoon. The tents were still there, partially buried in new snow. I dug out mine, crawled inside, and lay down without even taking my boots off. I should have radioed the others, should have melted water, should have eaten something. Instead, I closed my eyes and let myself drift. When I woke, it was dark and I was shivering hard. The temperature had dropped significantly. I checked my watch. Almost 9 at night. I'd been asleep for hours. I forced myself to sit up, got the stove going, melted snow, made tea. The simple tasks took all my concentration. I radioed Marcus, told him I'd made it to Camp 1 and was stable. "How's the headache?" he asked. "Better," I lied. "Good. Get some rest. We'll check in tomorrow." I said okay and turned off the radio. The wind had started again, not as strong as before, but steady. I lay in my sleeping bag listening to it, too tired to read, too uncomfortable to sleep properly. The headache pulsed behind my eyes. My mouth was dry. My stomach was empty and tight. Tomorrow I would descend to base camp. Another 6 hours of climbing down. Once I got below 14,000 feet, I'd start feeling better. That's how altitude sickness works. Descent fixes it. I just had to make it through the night. Outside the tent, the wind continued, the mountain settling into darkness. The others somewhere far above me, still climbing. I woke up Wednesday morning to the sound of wind hitting the tent like fists. The fabric rippled and snapped. Something was wrong with the light. Too dim, too grey. I unzipped the inner tent and looked out through the fly. Snow, heavy snow coming down sideways in the wind. Visibility maybe 20 feet. This wasn't in the forecast. I checked my watch. 6:30. I'd slept in fits through the night, waking every hour or so. My headache was still there but duller. The nausea had backed off slightly. Small improvements. I got the stove going and melted snow for tea. My hands were clumsy. It took 3 attempts to light the stove. The radio crackled. "Base camp to Camp 1, do you copy?" I picked up the radio. "This is Camp 1, I copy." "Michael, it's Dmitri, the expedition coordinator we'd hired in Bishkek. What's your status?" "I'm okay, waiting out the weather. The storm moved in faster than forecast. It's going to get worse before it gets better. You need to descend as soon as there's a break." I looked out at the whiteout conditions. "I can't see 10 feet in front of me." "I know. Wait for visibility, but be ready to move fast when it clears." "What about the others?" A pause. "They're at Camp 3. They made the decision to shelter there. They have supplies for 3 days." Camp 3 was at 21,000 feet. Higher altitude meant more risk, but they had tents and fuel. They'd be okay if they stayed put. "Understood," I said. "Check in every 4 hours," Dmitri said. "If you don't check in, I'm sending a team up." After the call, I sat in my tent drinking tea and watching the snow. The wind was relentless. Every few minutes a gust would hit hard enough that I thought the tent might rip free of its anchors. I needed to descend. That was clear. But descending in these conditions would be suicide. No visibility meant no way to follow the route. One wrong step, and I'd walk off a cornice or into a crevasse. So I waited. The morning passed slowly. I tried to eat an energy bar, but only managed half. My stomach had shrunk. Everything tasted like cardboard. Around noon, the wind eased slightly. The snow thinned. I could see maybe 40 feet now. Not good visibility, but better. I radioed base camp. "I'm going to try to descend. Visibility is marginal, but workable." "Copy that," Dmitri said. "Take your time. Better slow than dead." I packed my gear, took down the inner tent, but left the fly staked. No point carrying extra weight, and it might help someone else later. My pack still weighed 30 pounds, even with minimal supplies. I started down at 12:30. The route was harder to follow than I'd expected. Our tracks from 2 days ago were completely buried. I had to navigate by landmarks, a rock outcropping, a distinctive ice formation, the general angle of the slope. Every few minutes I'd stop and look around, making sure I was still en route. The snow continued falling. Light now, but steady. The wind pushed it into my face. I had to keep wiping my goggles. About 45 minutes into the descent, I came to a section I didn't recognize. The slope looked steeper than I remembered, more exposed. I stopped and tried to orient myself. To my left, a ridge of rock. To my right, open snowfield dropping away into grey nothing. This seemed right. I thought this was right. I took another step forward, and my foot punched through a snow bridge. I fell forward, catching myself on my ice axe, my leg dangling in empty space. A crevasse, hidden under the new snow. I pulled myself back carefully, my heart slamming in my chest. Tested the snow to the left, solid. I moved that direction, giving the hidden crevasse a wide margin. After that, I moved even more carefully. Each step a deliberate choice, each placement tested. The descent that should have taken 3 or 4 hours stretched into 6. The visibility got worse as the afternoon wore on. The temperature dropped. My water bottle froze despite being inside my jacket. Around 4 o'clock, I reached a section of steep ice. I'd climbed up it 2 days ago using fixed ropes. The ropes should still be there. I couldn't find them. I traversed along the ice face, looking. The ropes had to be here. We'd left them specifically for the descent. After 20 minutes of searching, I found one rope, half buried in snow. I dug it out and tested it, still solid. I clipped in and started rappelling down. Halfway down, the rope slipped. Just an inch, but enough to spike adrenaline through my system. I stopped moving and hung there, checking the anchor point above. I couldn't see it clearly through the falling snow. I continued down slowly. The rope held. At the bottom, I unclipped and stood on solid snow, breathing hard. My legs were shaking. Not from exertion exactly, from something else. Accumulated stress maybe, or fear. I checked my altimeter. 16,000 feet. Still 1,000 feet above Camp 1. I'd somehow gotten off route. I pulled out my GPS unit and checked my position. The screen showed me about 300 yards west of where I should be. Not terrible. I could correct course. I started traversing east, following the GPS. The terrain was broken here. Small ice cliffs, rocky outcrops, areas where the snow had been scoured away by wind. It was getting dark. I hadn't accounted for that. At this latitude in late September, full dark came around 6. I had maybe 45 minutes of usable light left. I pushed harder, moving faster than was safe. I needed to reach camp before darkness made navigation impossible. At 5:30 I saw the tents. 2 small orange domes mostly buried in snow. Camp 1. I stumbled the last 100 yards and collapsed next to my tent. Sat there in the snow, breathing hard, feeling nothing except exhaustion. It took me 10 minutes to dig out the tent entrance. My hands weren't working right. The cold had gotten deep into them. I crawled inside and just lay there. Didn't take off my boots. Didn't get out the stove. Just lay there while the darkness came on outside, and the wind continued and the snow kept falling. Eventually, I forced myself to move. Got the stove going, melted snow, made tea. The warmth in my hands as I held the cup was the first pleasant sensation I'd felt in hours. I radioed base camp. "I'm at Camp 1, I said. "Made it down." "Copy. Good work. How are you feeling?" I thought about that question. My headache was better. The altitude had helped, but everything else felt worse. My body was used up. My hands were borderline frostbitten. My legs had nothing left. "I'm okay," I said. "I'll descend to base camp tomorrow." Weather forecast shows this system lasting another 36 hours at least. You might need to wait it out. I looked at my supplies. I had food for maybe 2 more days if I rationed, fuel for 3 days. Water wasn't a problem. I could melt snow. "I'll wait for a break in the weather," I said. After the radio call, I sat in my tent listening to the storm. The wind, the snow hitting the fabric, the small sounds of the tent flexing and settling. Somewhere above me, Marcus and Sarah and Derek were doing the same thing, waiting, conserving energy, trusting that the weather would eventually clear. I ate half a freeze-dried meal, drank more tea, got into my sleeping bag fully clothed. The altitude headache was gone, but a different kind of tiredness had settled into my bones, deep fatigue, the kind that sleep doesn't fix. I closed my eyes and listened to the mountain doing what mountains do, indifferent to whether I was on it or not. The storm cleared Thursday afternoon. I woke to silence and knew immediately that the wind had stopped. When I unzipped the tent fly, the sky was blue and empty. I radioed base camp. "Weather's clear. I'm descending now." "Copy that. We have eyes on you. Take it slow." I packed my gear and started down at 2 in the afternoon. The new snow made everything look different, softer. The hard edges of rock and ice rounded over, but the route was visible in daylight. I followed my general sense of direction more than any specific landmarks. My body moved mechanically, 1 foot, then the other. Check placement, move ice axe, repeat. I'd done this thousands of times. It required no conscious thought. The descent took 4 hours. By 6 I could see base camp below, several tents, prayer flags, the tiny figures of people moving around. It looked almost unreal after days at altitude, color and movement and horizontal ground. Dmitri met me at the edge of camp. He took my pack without asking and walked with me to the mess tent. "Sit, I'll get you tea." I sat on a folding chair. Someone had already radioed ahead that I was coming down. A few of the porters nodded at me. The cook brought food, rice, lentils, flatbread. I ate slowly, forcing myself to chew and swallow. "The others?" I asked. "Still at Camp 3, Dmitri said. "They radioed this morning. They're waiting for conditions to improve before attempting the summit. Maybe tomorrow, maybe Saturday." I nodded and kept eating. That night I slept in a proper tent with a cot and a sleeping pad that wasn't frozen. I slept for 12 hours and woke feeling hollow rather than rested. Friday I did nothing. Sat in camp, drank tea, watched the mountain. The weather held, clear skies, minimal wind, good summit conditions. Around 4 in the afternoon, Dmitri's radio crackled. Marcus's voice broken by static and distance. "Base camp, this is Camp 3. We've summited." All 4 climbers, descending now to Camp 2. Dmitri smiled. "Copy that. Congratulations. See you tomorrow." I felt something when I heard that. Not jealousy exactly. Something else I couldn't name. A kind of absence. They made it back to base camp Saturday afternoon. I watched them come down the final moraine. 3 tiny figures against the white slope, moving slowly but steadily. When they reached camp, there were handshakes and congratulations. The cook brought out a bottle of vodka he'd been saving. Sarah hugged me. "I'm sorry you couldn't be up there with us." "It's fine," I said. "I made the right call. Still, I know it's not what you wanted." Marcus clapped me on the shoulder. "You did good getting yourself down in that storm. That took skill." I nodded and accepted a small glass of vodka and drank it even though I didn't want it. That evening they talked about the summit, the final push, the view from the top. The technical crux at 23,000 feet. I listened and made appropriate comments, but felt like I was watching them through glass. We left base camp Sunday morning. Horses carried our gear back down to the road. Then a long drive to Bishkek. Then flights home, first to Istanbul, then to Seattle. I slept most of the way. When I was awake, I looked out the airplane window at nothing. Sarah and Marcus had a connection through Portland. Derek was continuing to San Francisco. We said goodbye at baggage claim in Seattle. Promised to stay in touch. Agreed we should climb together again soon. I took a taxi home to my apartment in Capitol Hill. It was Tuesday evening. I'd been gone 3 weeks. My apartment looked exactly the same. Mail piled by the door, the coffee maker on the counter, my spare climbing gear in the closet. I walked through the rooms touching things, confirming they were real. I showered, ordered food, ate half of it and put the rest in the fridge. That night I lay in my own bed, in my own apartment, in a city at sea level where the air was thick and easy to breathe, and I couldn't sleep, not because I was uncomfortable. The opposite. Everything was too soft, too quiet, too easy. I got up around 2 in the morning and stood at my window, looking out at the street. A few cars passing, streetlights, the ordinary nighttime of a city. I went back to work the following Monday. People asked how the climb went, and I gave them the abbreviated version. Made it to Camp 2, got altitude sick, had to descend. The others summited without me. Everyone was safe. That must have been disappointing, my manager said. Yeah, I said, but that's mountaineering. You don't always summit. She nodded like that made sense. I sat at my desk and answered emails and attended meetings and did all the normal things I'd done before. Everything functioned. My body was here. My mind was somewhere else. That evening I went to the gym. Did an easy workout, stretched, showered, drove home. Sarah texted asking if I wanted to meet for coffee that weekend. I said sure, and we set a time. Saturday I drove to the coffee shop we'd agreed on. She was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table with 2 cups in front of her. "Got you an Americano," she said. "Hope that's okay." "Perfect, thanks." We talked for a while about normal things. Her job, my job. Mutual friends. Then she got quiet and looked at me carefully. "Are you doing okay?" she asked. "Really? I'm fine. Why?" "I don't know. You seem different. Distant, maybe." I drank some coffee. "I'm just tired still. The altitude takes it out of you." "It's been 2 weeks." "I know." She waited, but I didn't say anything else. "If you want to talk about it," she said, "about having to turn back or anything else, I'm here." "There's nothing to talk about. I got sick. I descended. It happens." She nodded slowly. "Okay, but the offer stands." We finished our coffee and talked about other things and said goodbye in the parking lot. She hugged me and said to take care of myself. I drove home and spent the rest of the weekend alone. The dreams started that week. Not every night, but several times. I'd be back on the mountain, not climbing exactly, just there, moving through snow, trying to find something or get somewhere. The details were vague and shifted. I'd wake up and the dreams would fade immediately, leaving only a feeling, not fear, not quite anxiety, something more like recognition. During the day I was fine. I went to work. I went to the gym. I ate and slept and did laundry and paid bills. Everything normal. But sometimes I'd be sitting at my desk or standing in line at the grocery store or driving home from work, and I'd feel it. A kind of pressure, like the air was thinner than it should be. Like I was still at altitude even though I wasn't. It would pass after a few seconds, but it kept happening. I didn't mention it to anyone. What would I say? That I felt like I'd brought something back with me? That sounded ridiculous even thinking it. 3 weeks after getting home, I was standing in my kitchen making coffee when I noticed my hands shaking slightly. Not from cold or caffeine, just shaking. I set down the coffee pot and held my hands in front of me, watching them tremble. They'd been steady on the mountain, even in the storm, even exhausted and altitude sick. My hands had been steady. Now, safe at home, they shook. I made the coffee anyway and drank it standing at the counter, looking out my kitchen window at the grey Seattle morning, wondering what exactly I'd left up there and what exactly had followed me down. I stopped going to the gym after a month, not because I was injured or too tired. I just stopped. The treadmills and ellipticals and weight machines felt pointless. Movement without destination, effort without consequence. Sarah texted occasionally, asked how I was doing, sent links to upcoming climbs, a winter ascent in the Cascades, a spring expedition to Denali. I read the messages but rarely responded. Marcus called in early November, said they were putting together a team for Aconcagua in January. Did I want in? "I don't think so," I said. "You sure? It's a straightforward climb." "Good for getting back out there after—" "I'm sure. Thanks, though." A pause on the line. "Okay, well, let me know if you change your mind." I didn't change my mind. Work continued. Projects and deadlines and meetings. I showed up on time, did what was required. My performance reviews were fine. No one complained. But I noticed I was checking the weather constantly, multiple times a day. Not Seattle weather. I didn't care about that. Weather on mountains. Wind speeds at high altitude. Barometric pressure. Storm systems moving through Central Asia. I had apps on my phone. Websites bookmarked. I'd be sitting in a meeting and pull out my phone under the table to check conditions on Pic Pobeda, or Cho Oyu, or Nanga Parbat. Mountains I had no plans to climb. I couldn't explain why I was doing it. It just felt necessary. In December, my apartment lease came up for renewal. I looked at the paperwork for a week before signing it. Every time I picked up the pen, I'd stop and put it down again. The apartment was fine, affordable, close to work. There was no logical reason to move, but something about committing to another year in that space felt wrong, like agreeing to stay at an altitude that wasn't quite right for me. I signed it eventually, didn't move, nothing changed. The holidays came. My brother invited me to Christmas dinner. I went and sat at his table with his family and ate turkey and made conversation. His kids showed me presents they'd gotten. Everyone was warm and loud and happy. I left after dessert, said I wasn't feeling well. In the car, I sat in his driveway for 20 minutes before driving away. Through his living room window, I could see them moving around. Normal life. The kind of life that made sense. I drove home and spent the rest of the evening alone. The dreams hadn't stopped. They'd changed, though. Now, when I was on the mountain in dreams, I wasn't trying to get anywhere. I was just there, standing in snow, looking at grey sky, waiting for something that never came. I'd wake up and check my hands. They still shook sometimes. Not always, just randomly. I'd be holding a coffee cup or typing an email and notice the tremor. In January, I started going for walks at night, late after midnight, when the streets were empty. I'd walk for hours sometimes, through neighborhoods, down to the waterfront, up steep hills that made my legs burn. I wasn't training for anything. I just walked. One night in early February, I walked all the way to Kerry Park. It was maybe 2 a.m. The city spread out below, lights reflecting off the sound. Clear night, cold, I could see my breath. I stood at the viewpoint and looked west toward the Olympic Mountains. They were invisible in the darkness, but I knew they were there. Beyond them, the ocean. Beyond that, other ranges. The Rockies, the Pamirs, the Himalayas. All of it connected. All of it part of the same system of uplift and erosion and stone. I stood there until my feet went numb. Then I walked home. At work, I started making mistakes. Small things, missed deadlines, forgotten meetings. My manager called me in to talk about it. "Is everything okay?" she asked. "You seem distracted lately." "I'm fine. I'll do better." "If you need some time off." "I don't need time off." She looked at me carefully. "Okay, but if that changes, let me know." I nodded and went back to my desk. That evening I stayed late at the office. Not because I had work to do. The building was just quieter after everyone left. The air conditioning hummed. The lights were dimmed. It felt more tolerable than my apartment. I sat at my desk and opened a browser and searched for weather conditions on Pic Pabida. High winds. Temperature at the summit -40. Storm system moving through. I looked at the numbers and felt something loosen slightly in my chest. Not relief exactly, more like recognition, like confirming something I already knew. The weather was bad up there. It would be bad for days. No one was climbing. The mountain was empty. I closed the browser and sat in the quiet office, staring at nothing. When I finally went home, it was after midnight. The streets were empty. I drove through neighborhoods I'd lived in for years, past buildings and parks and shops I'd passed 1,000 times, and everything looked slightly unfamiliar. Like a place I'd visited once but didn't really know. I parked in my building's garage and sat in the car with the engine off. The concrete walls, the fluorescent lights, the oil stains on the ground. I thought about Camp 1, the tent, the wind, the grey light through the fabric, lying there in my sleeping bag, exhausted and sick and alone, but knowing exactly where I was, knowing what the danger was, knowing what I needed to do. Here, I didn't know any of that. I got out of the car and took the elevator to my floor and unlocked my apartment and went inside. The air was stale. I hadn't opened a window in days. I should open a window. I didn't open a window. I made tea and sat on my couch and drank it while looking at my phone. Weather conditions, wind speeds, barometric pressure. The same information I'd checked hours before. Nothing had changed. I set down my phone and finished my tea and sat in the silence of my apartment. Outside, the city continued. Traffic, voices, the ordinary sounds of people living their lives at sea level where the air is thick and easy to breathe. I sat there listening to it like I was listening from very far away, like I was somewhere else entirely, looking down at all of this from a great height, through thin air and distance and clouds that never fully cleared. My hands were steady tonight. I noticed that, held them out in front of me to confirm. Steady. I didn't know what that meant, if it meant anything. I sat there for a long time, alone in my apartment, while outside the February night moved slowly toward morning.